You reminded me of the example that I heard on at least one power plant tour where I was told that we run a power plant and then we run a science project on the outside once you leave the power generation portion. You certainly reinforced that. You also reminded me why I went to law school, and I'm not an engineer or a scientist, so thank you for that as well. Our third speaker this morning is a former colleague of mine and a good friend, John Quackenbush, who is the chairman of the Michigan Public Service Commission. And John is going to talk to us this morning about some of the things we've already talked about and what the impacts are on Michigan's changing generation fleet. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in the city of Chicago. Hope you're having a great time while you're here. Hopefully the rain will stay away for the next day or two while we're here. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Michigan specifically. I can tell you what we're doing there and how it kind of meshes with some of the things we've heard from our first presenter this morning. But let's go to the first slide. And I'll give you a little bit of the context here. It was in the year 2008, Michigan passed a law, or a set of laws that were somewhat comprehensive in addressing energy issues. And the vision in 2008 was that we have targets and goals for 2015. And I'll refer to those a little bit this morning, but the main context I want to give you up front is that we're approaching 2015. We're going to meet our goals and targets, and so we're now doing work to get ready for what's beyond 2015. So the governor, Governor Snyder, delivered a special message on energy and the environment in November of 2012 to kind of kick off this process. He said no matter what we do, we have to approach this with a focus on adaptability. That's the foundation. And we have to be focused on reliability, affordability, and protecting the environment. So specifically, he asked us to take a look at energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electric choice were the big three issues that we focused on. So let's go to the next slide, which shows what we did in response to the governor's request. During 2013, we gathered a lot of input from a lot of different parties. We asked for data, studies, reports, facts, keep the focus on factual-based information on these key areas of energy. So we started out with, in January of 2013, and we laid out 7 public forums that would occur during the first half of the year around the state. We launched a website where we asked over 100 questions of different parties and asked the public and all interested parties to submit answers. We started out with 84 questions, and we went to the legislature and had some conversations with them, and they had 20 other questions they wanted to supplement. So we ended up with 104 questions that were posted on our website. We asked for comments to be submitted by a certain period of time, by, well, April 25th was our deadline. We got hundreds of submissions, and in response to those submissions, we prepared some reports. So the next slide will show us kind of the timing of the reports. You can see just process-wise, we prepared draft reports by, in the September-October time period. We put those out for public comment and then revised the reports and called them final reports by Thanksgiving of 2013. You can see the website up here. The reports are still available out there, as well as all the comments and the transcripts from the public forums that we held around the state. So after going through that year-long process, the next slide shows us what happened next. Governor Snyder held a media roundtable in December last year where he laid out a vision for a no-regrets energy future. he suggested that our focus should be on 2025, so we kind of already know where we're going to be in 2015. Let's set a 10-year plan out through 2025. And he called for an emphasis on eliminating energy waste, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means, as well as replacing coal with newer, cleaner technologies, including natural gas-fired generation and renewables. You know, we already know that we have coal plants in the state that are planning to be retired in 2016, and so we got to, you know, have a plan for how we're going to replace them, and we may have a few more that retire in some of the out years during that decade as well. So as you heard this morning, the EPA has given us some work to do in figuring out where we stand as a state, and some of this work we're already embarked on kind of lays a foundation and kind of meshes with what the analysis says we need to do for them. So we'll be working, we're still, you know, reading through the 111D guidelines and proposed rules, and we'll assess those and you know, figure out what the right path is for Michigan. But these efforts will kind of overlap and be very have some synergies involved to going through both at the same time. So the next slide shows the information on the left-hand side. This is, I know it's hard for you to read, it's small print, but this is a one-page document that the governor used in his media roundtable in last December. And as you can see, it focuses on the key areas of adaptability, reliability, affordability, and protecting the environment. So I'm going to select a few of these boxes and describe what work we've done already and we're continuing to do here. Again, under adaptability, the governor suggested a 2025 time frame, the coal retirements. Eliminating energy waste is the first thing I'm going to highlight, along with the renewables and natural gas. And on renewables, the focus for us is on onshore wind. We do have a little bit of solar activity. We've looked at offshore wind, and it's quite expensive. And it seems like for this decade anyway, our focus in the renewable area will be on onshore wind, although it, you know, things can change, and we want to be flexible to adopt, but that's kind of the plan going forward. So let's delve into energy efficiency first a little bit. The next slide shows you the pie of the comments that we received, and we did get about 87 responses to our questions on energy efficiency, and we ended up preparing a 389-page report, and that included some appendices, which I'll describe a little bit. But here you can see the most interesting, the comments expressed an interest mostly in improving Michigan's existing energy optimization programs or energy efficiency, as well as we did a lot of work comparing Michigan to other states to see, you know, who's doing what out there that might be better programs that we can emulate, or some things that have run into problems elsewhere that we might want to avoid. And so we tried to do a lot of benchmarking in this. So the next slide shows you a snapshot of the existing the existing plans that we have, or the existing programs we have. And over here on the right-hand side, you can see what our targets were. We decided as a state that 1% per year savings on electricity was a reasonable target. But the law passed in 2008, and we decided to phase it in over several years. So you can see on the right here, we started out at 0.3% in 2009, 0.5% in 2010, and on up. And by 2012, we hit the 1%. And under the existing law, that 1% will continue perpetually unless something is changed as an annual target. So how have we done versus the target? Over here on the left-hand side, it shows each two bars shows what the target was and what we actually achieved. And as you can see, as you compare these in this, every measurement period, we've been able to exceed the target for energy efficiency on electricity. And we kind of showed a 2013 target here. The results aren't finalized yet, but it seems like we did again beat the 2013, and we expect that we'll be able to meet or exceed the targets all the way through 2015. So that's kind of the context of where we are today. The next slide shows similar information, but it's on the gas side. And again, I won't dwell on this. We're focused mostly on electricity today, but again, we did set a phased-in target in gas case to get up to 0.75%, a little bit more modest target than electricity. And then again, over here, for every measurement period, you can see the actual exceeded the target. So let's go on to the next slide, which shows the cost effectiveness of this energy efficiency. You know, what we've done, and this is an example using 2012 data. We incented the utilities to make expenditures on energy efficiency projects, and there was about $246 million expended, some capital, some expense, but mostly expense. And the payback on that, or the life cycle savings we were able to achieve with those programs, was $936 million. That's over the life cycle of those projects. So when we calculate it all out, we're getting, at least in 2012, about a 4-to-1 payback on the energy efficiency projects. And when we figure it out as in terms of a levelized cost, which we can compare to generation sources, it's about $20 a megawatt hour. And of course, you know, all existing sources of generation are significantly higher than that. And so this looks to be a pretty low cost resource that we can rely on. Now the question is, how much can we continue to rely on it? So we've heard a lot of comments from parties that participated that perhaps, you know, we've done the easiest projects. It gets tougher sledding ahead. You know, perhaps it's not as easy to do energy efficiency projects in the future at the same cost-effective payback. And I'll show you some information on that in the next slide or two. But for this slide, basically, I wanted to emphasize it was a stated goal of our existing energy efficiency programs that the intent was to delay new generation build. It's very much viewed as a resource that could prevent new generation from being built. So when you think of like a natural gas-fired plant, perhaps being $65 a megawatt hour, you know, coal and nuclear are clearly much more than that today if you're going to build new. We can build wind in Michigan in the 40s per megawatt hour, and so it still seems like a potentially economical goal to continue doing energy efficiency programs. So we did some looks to see, and this is the next slide, which shows some studies we asked to be done. We did have some grant money to help us get some consultants that could come in and do energy efficiency studies for us. We did have the utilities and NARUC, which is our national organization of state regulatory commissioners that Michigan and all the rest of the states belong to, and you know, we get together and compare notes once in a while. They were able to provide us some grant money, in a combination from several different sources, we had some 10-year studies done. And here, this kind of shows, I'll focus on the electricity side of the graph, but over a 10-year period, there was an economic potential identified to go over 30% savings in terms of the electricity we consumed. Now, that's not all achievable, and so by the time you chop that down, it's somewhere in the 13 to 14% range over a 10-year period, which would imply a 1.3, 1.4% run rate if you translate it into an annual target. And then there's also a budget constraint that's in our current law that would, if it stays there, would limit us more down into this area, well below the 10%. So one of the things we're considering doing in the legislation is to look at what is the new target. Should it be something, around this level? I mean, right here is where our existing law would put us, and then there's a budget constraint on top of that that would knock us down here. So the question is, where do we want to come out? And that's something our legislature will have the final say on. But similar concept on the natural gas side. I won't dwell on that for today. But that's the context of how we're thinking about energy efficiency. And as you know, that was one of the primary building block things that the EPA had in their proposed rules. And so, again, that may fit pretty well. I'd like to move on to the next slide, which is renewable energy. And here again, we had 425 responses on our website, and we ended up putting out a report on this one too. Here you can see the most comments were received on the RPS design as well as on the cost of renewables. So the next slide shows you how we're meeting the current standard. We have a goal of 10% renewable energy by 2015. You could see we ramped up, by 2011 we were still very modest. We had a big build year during 2012. You could see it jumped up here to 964 megawatts. Continued with some build during 2013, and our goal is to get up to the 1468 megawatt line by 2015. What we actually did was we pulled forward 3 wind projects that were scheduled to be built in 2015, that more got pulled ahead into 2014 completion dates in order to qualify for the PTC, which was mentioned this morning. We don't know exactly, the PTC is kind of officially over, but it could be extended again, and new projects may not get the PTC unless there's a final, whether there's a change in the federal law. So we took advantage of those, so to speak, and made sure that the remaining projects we were going to build by 2015 qualified for the PTC, which meant that you had to begin construction by the end of 2013. So this is the path we're on, and most of this, you can see the light blue bars are the wind, which is all onshore wind. So you can see, roughly 94% by the time we get out here to 2015, 94% of everything we do to meet the renewables target is wind. We have a little bit of solar and a little bit of landfill gas, as well as some anaerobic digesters there. We have a little bit of hydro, but that was pre-existing before the RPS. The next slide shows a little bit of generation diversity, and I'll describe it this way because it might be a little hard to read the labels. The left-hand side is Michigan, and the right-hand bar over here is the U.S. averages. And so Michigan's over here, U.S. is here, and then in the middle are some surrounding states that are our neighbors that we often get compared to. So one thing to start out with coal, which is on the bottom here. Coal, we are higher. Right here, we're coming over 50% coal. We're higher than the U.S. average over here. But we're also lower than some of our surrounding states. Like you can look at one of Todd's favorite states, Ohio here, is significantly more coal than we do, and Indiana is even higher. And then, of course, Wisconsin is another state that comes in higher than us. So this is just a starting point for comparison. Now, the other thing I wanted to highlight is natural gas. If you look at the U.S. average over here for natural gas, it's a much bigger bar than any of us Midwesterners here. Here's Michigan's gas. And we have, when you hear a lot about the gas pipeline challenges and, is it a good idea to build new gas? Some states that are more coastal have more to think about there because they're already heavily gas, but we're somewhat under average on gas here in the Midwest. So we can build some new gas plants and not be not be way overweighted gas. I also wanted to highlight nuclear, which is the red. You can see Michigan has about a nice 20 to 25% slice of nuclear. We have 4 nuclear units on 3 sites, and of course, though we'd like to keep those around, those have been very reliable and for providing generation. And also, when you think about upcoming carbon regulations, those are carbon free, obviously. So they're very much they're set up to handle that quite well. You can see Illinois. I just wanted to highlight them. They're here. You can see how much a big, thicker slice of nuclear they have compared to the rest of us in the Midwest. Other than that, I'll just final one I'll look at is wind. It's this green at the top. As you can see, Michigan has a very modest slice. Of course, this is kind of like this data is from the 2012-2013 time frame, and this is more based on what was generated during those years. The prior slide showed what was available by the end of each year. So we're not really up. This slide doesn't reflect the run rate Michigan's at for wind generation yet, but you can see it's modest, and Minnesota stands out as being the state around our surrounding area that has the most wind generation during this time period. So with that, let's go to the next slide that shows the cost of wind. Now, when Michigan embarked on wind generation, the first contracts were relatively expensive still. You can see this is in the 08, 09, 2010 time period. Costs were well over $100 per megawatt hour. And that cost has come down significantly so that these contracts, recent contracts, have been coming in at $50, or we actually had one come in at $48. And what's the reason for that? Well, the technology has continued to develop. We get higher capacity factors out of wind today than we thought we would a few years ago. The towers are taller, the rotors are larger, the electronics are enhanced. And so we've been quite pleased with the cost profile here. Now, compare this to the average Michigan generating source is about $65 a megawatt hour. So when we were building wind and bringing it online up here over 100, we are averaging up our generation costs. At $48 or $50, we're averaging down our generation costs. Now, I'll mention that this is contingent on receiving the PTC benefits from the federal government. And so if that's no longer available, we'll have to factor that in terms of how we think about the economics of wind over time. But it seems there has been a very good story about the technology improving over time. Let's go to the next slide, which kind of wraps up the, well, it summarizes the renewables, the grid integration concerns. You know, one of the things you hear about wind is, well, you know, it's less reliable, it's intermittent, it may not be there all the time when you want the power. Maybe it blows at times when it's off peak and it's not blowing on peak. So we took a look. We tried to get a hold of the best studies and data we could to see, you know, how much, when do we have to start thinking about introducing more wind being a problem? And from the evidence we got, we basically suggested that basically by the time we get to our 2015 target at 10%, we're going to get there without having any reliability problems or challenges. It seems like that's something we don't have to be overly concerned about. But the higher we go, we got to start thinking about it more. So MISO and PJM have both done some studies, and MISO has done some experience. So there are some states in the Midwest that have gotten up close to 20% wind generation, and MISO provided some evidence that they can handle that with their grid and their interconnections, and if you're pretty comfortable, we can get up at least approaching 20% without having to be overly concerned about making additional expenditures to be able to accommodate the wind. PJM recently, they weren't focused on Michigan, but they were looking at their whole network, multi-state network. 30% penetration, they suggested, was attainable. So let's talk a little bit about potential on the next slide. Just to show you some scenarios we looked at. Our scenarios are on the right-hand side. Some data that was provided to us is on the left-hand side. Over here, there's some information that came from NREL, and they showed our theoretical maximum potential wind generation as well as our estimated Michigan potential, and the key number for onshore wind comes out something around 11 to 20 gigawatts they think we can handle, and you know, we're at 1.5 by the end of 2015, so you know, who knows if we can ever get up to that number, but we certainly have potential to do more than what we'll have by 2015. We've also had a major transmission line called the Thumb Loop built. It's about 2/3 complete today, and it's already serving wind farms in our Thumb area of Michigan, which is where one of our best wind resource areas. And so that transmission line was sized and is already being built to handle the maximum wind potential for that zone. And so we know we can add more wind farms there without any more incremental transmission spend. We've funded this in Michigan through a renewable energy surcharge, which referred to right here, which was about $3 a month per residential customer. And that's, we found that that was more money than we needed, and we've actually, the utilities have requested several times to come in and reduce that charge. As a matter of fact, the charges currently are somewhere in the area of you know, well less than $1 per month per residential customer, and we have a request pending before us to take it to zero, because that particular utility feels that they've already collected enough money to fund these renewables projects for the remaining life. Just one thing about over here, you could see that we've generally, when we looked at these scenarios, studied how much renewables we could do. This was based on like a 1% annual pace, which we thought was a doable kind of pace to proceed on. So let's go to the next slide, and we will talk about a comparison of states. And here's what we found. You know, a lot of states have RPSs, and they're hard to compare because, one, different states have defined what is a renewable differently. They've answered that question differently. Also, they've applied it differently. There are some states where they say they have a 10% RPS or whatever the number is. They apply it only to the largest utility in the state and no one else. Or maybe they apply it only to investor-owned utilities and not to municipalities or co-ops. In Michigan, when we went to 10%, it applies to everybody. There's no exceptions. The munis, the co-ops, all the investor-owned utilities, and even the alternative electric suppliers have to meet that as well. So the question is, how do you compare? How do you compare across states? Also, states started with different legacy positions, and they also have different annual growth rates. So this slide was submitted to us by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and what they've tried to do is kind of restate things for some of the factors I just mentioned. And you know, some people might look at Michigan and say, well, you have a 10% RPS, it's lower than a lot of other states. You're kind of in the lower half or whatever in terms of where you come out. Well, when the Union Concerned Scientists kind of made some adjustments to restate it, they found that Michigan comes out 11th. If you just use 2015 as the time period to compare where everyone will be, so Michigan does come out better than that 10% headline number might suggest. But if we did nothing beyond that, and we didn't have a new standard or new mandate, we would fall down to where we were 18th compared to other states. So this was just an interesting data point that kind of helped us compare a little bit across states. So with that in mind, we're taking a look at where we want to go with renewable energy. Next slide kind of goes back to this to the governor's focus, and I want to just talk briefly about reliability. The governor suggested that Michigan should become a leader in reliability. In terms of number of outages or frequency of outages, we should be in the top quartile compared to other states. And in terms of the duration of outages, we should be in the top half. And so what we did was we took a look at distribution reliability and transmission reliability. And first, I'll talk about the next slide will show you distribution. We have some of our utilities here. If you look at the dotted black line, which goes through here, shows you the Michigan statewide average for the SAFE. You know, this is based focusing on frequency. Michigan, our aspiration will be to be in the top quartile, and you know, we do have winter in Michigan, which is challenges some states don't have, and we also have lots and lots of trees. So this goal was picked because we're not there yet. It's a challenge for our utilities to meet, but it is attainable. It is a doable goal. The next slide just shows the same thing for duration. Again, we have you know, similar things. The Michigan is the dotted black line. All right, let's go ahead to reliability of supply. The next slide, let's skip ahead to the one after this. Again, focused on supply. Okay, so we are in MISO, and you can see Zone 7 is our lower peninsula of Michigan, right in here. And then Zone 2 is our upper peninsula, which we share with eastern Wisconsin. And we do have a corner down here that's actually PJM in the southwestern corner, right across from Chicago here. But I just want to show you some numbers related to Zone 7 and Zone 2. If we go to the next slide, this is Zone 7. MISO, I'll dwell on the right side of this chart where the right side is an update to the left. So they say our Zone 7 is 1.9 gigawatts short in 2016 when you factor in coal closures. The next slide shows the same thing about Zone 2. MISO revised their what they called an expected shortfall to a minor expected surplus. But as I'd like to mention, even though this Zone 2 is in an expected surplus, we do have some concerns about reliability in our Upper Peninsula due to constrained transmission in a particular power plant. On affordability, let's go to the next slide. We're focused on total customer bills. And on this very next slide, it will show us electric choice. You know, we're one of the hybrid states that has some choice, but we have a 10% cap on it. So we also asked commenters to tell us about where they were on choice. And the following slide shows us just some statistics. You can see the 10% cap for our utilities. Right here is where things stand in terms of what percent of the customer or load participates in choice, and we actually have a queue lined up for people that want to get in because those rates are lower than currently. And right here you can see for our two largest utilities, it's in the neighborhood of 22% of the customers would be on choice if they could get in. We found that we need to be focused on, and whether we're going to go into choice more or to retract from choice, that there's commodity cycles, price volatility, generation reliability, and rate levels and total customer bills are all things that we need to be focused on. So the next slide shows you some data on total company bills, which is interesting. It makes Michigan not unique, but it's a different consideration. In Michigan, you know, we use a lot of heat in the winter and less air conditioning than a lot of states in the summer. So our annual our residential customer gas bill, if you look, Michigan has pretty low total electric bill for the year. I mean, we make up for it by having higher natural gas bills that are skewed towards the winter. But on electricity, a customer's budget, if you look at disposable income that's consumed, the average Michigan customer, spends less on electricity in terms of their budget than the U.S. averages. So we do have rates, though, that are traditionally about average, national average, but they're actually higher today, or they've recently gone above average. But so we're keeping that in mind too as we go through this process. Maybe I will just focus on what happens next. If we go to the next slide, it talks about ensuring that energy-intensive industries can choose Michigan for jobs and investment decisions. So what are we doing? The next slide shows we've started work groups. So I talked a little bit about the report writing process we had in 2013. 2014 is our year for work groups. We have an energy-intensive users work group. I won't dwell on it other than to say it's happening, and we have a the next slide shows a little bit more detail about what we're focused on. Some industries in our state have a significant portion of their operating costs are electricity, and we also have their location decisions are based highly on energy costs. So we're taking a look at reallocating costs between the different user groups. And the next slide refers to House Bill 5476. This is a bill that recently passed the House and the Senate. It's been reconciled, and it's expected that the governor will sign this bill this afternoon. And what it basically does, it makes clear that the commission has the authority to redistribute reallocate costs and change rates outside of a general rate case. So what's basically going to happen for our three largest utilities during August through April, there'll be some proceedings. There'll be orders that will come out somewhere in the June to November of 2015 time frame in response to that. Let's go to the next slide, which is, I think I just may skip over this, but I can answer questions about it. We have a power plant in our Upper Peninsula that's in a particularly reliability challenged zone, and it's slated to be closed for environmental reasons. It's the only baseload power we have in the Upper Peninsula, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of twists and turns here, but if we skip ahead, let's go ahead like 3 or 4 slides. Let's keep going. Let's go back one. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So just on the bottom, we're evaluating options. What we can do is we can build new generation in the Upper Peninsula to replace it, or we can build new transmission to replace it. But the challenge is that transmission, we're told by the incumbent transmission provider, won't be ready or can't be ready until 2019. The environmental rules that have to be lived with will be taking effect much earlier than that. So that's a challenge. And then one other thing I won't dwell on, but I can answer questions if anyone's interested. It just has to do with, because it's so close to Wisconsin and Michigan, there's an issue of cost sharing there, and there's a current FERC complaint case pending about that. Let me just wrap up with the final slide that shows you where we're at and where we're going. It's the pie chart here, which is next. In 2012, you kind of see where we were on coal and gas and nuclear and so forth. And then 2025, how are we going to get to where we're going to go? Well, we have a pretty good start, but we need to get a better handle on coal retirements, how it's going to impact the pie. We're going to eliminate energy waste. We have a little slice up here of stuff we've done from 09 to 12, which is kind of avoided generation. We think we can grow that piece of the pie significantly. And then also build some more renewables, and also build some new gas-fired generation. And the question is, like with a lot of states, how much is our load growth going to be? How much do we have to factor that in? So all things considered, we're focused on where we're going to get by 2025. We know where we were in 2012. We know that this natural gas slice here that's kind of like a record year for Michigan in generating gas because of utilization. Gas prices for a good chunk of the summer were $2.50, and gas was dispatched a lot more in 2012 than even what it was in 2013. So we know this number has come off. We just need to factor that into our calculations too. But with that, let me end there and be happy to answer some questions.
Great. Thank you, John. With that, if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Raise your hand. Great.
Quick question. Back to Presque, loss of 170 jobs. How does the state of Michigan compensate for, those loss of jobs and input to the economy and all the support industries, in those small towns in the Upper Peninsula?
Well, that's something we're keenly focused on. It's a relatively rural area, low-density population. We have some large customers that are mines up there. We potentially have some new mines that may open, but mining is kind of a challenging industry in the sense that you're based on a commodity price, and you may want to so you have to be focused on you might plan to open a mine and then commodity prices change and then you don't open it. So we're trying to plan to accommodate new load as well as keeping existing load, but we have to be flexible there. And we know that the economy is tied in. There's property tax issues, there's labor issues, and we're focused on that. We'd like to keep those Presque plant jobs there. for sure. That's a big part of the governor's focus. But we know we have to balance a whole lot of things, including, the environmental considerations where it's not cost effective to put a full suite of environmental upgrades on it. I think some of the stuff they're going to try and do is related to dry sorbent injection here to keep it going for a couple of years and try and, milk it along through 2019. It just doesn't seem, since it was built, the existing units there were built in the 70s. We have to consider how long it's going to be there, even if we can keep it alive temporarily. And MISO has ruled that this is absolutely needed for reliability, and so there's no, we can't just shut it down until there's a reliability solution. So that's one of the things that makes it tough, but certainly the effect on the local municipalities and on the workers in the area is a keen focus, and we're working with the cities and the local governments in the Upper Peninsula with a focus on that.
Thank you, John, for your interesting presentation about the governor's initiative for replacing coal with gas and renewables. I got two questions on it. What level of concern does the governor have about exposing ratepayers to future price volatility of natural gas as other utilities go in the same direction of more gas and less coal? And secondly, are there any energy storage projects being considered or underway to help align the dispatch of your onshore wind generation with periods of peak demand?
Okay, yeah. First on natural gas price swings. We are focused on that. We know that in the past, natural gas prices have been volatile at times, and we don't want to go way overweight gas. I think a couple of the things that make us feel favorable about gas is, number one, we do have some production in the state. We do produce about 20% of our needs in the state. We have great gas storage assets. We're the #1 state for gas storage. We have more than any other state, and we can bring it in all year long and store it right in Michigan for use in the winter. A lot of the challenges in other states have been that if the gas customers are calling on the gas in the winter, there's no capacity in the pipelines or in local storage to provide it to an electric generating plant. I think in Michigan, sure, we think about that, but we don't have to as much as others simply because we have all that storage. We're also well piped. We have pipes coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. We have gas coming down from Canada right into Michigan. We can accept gas from the Rockies and from the Marcellus and the Utica. We actually have a proposed pipeline, brand new build pipe that's it sounds like it's going to be contracted for and actually be built very soon, coming from Todd's Utica Shale in Ohio, wrapping into Michigan and around into Ontario. And so we feel pretty good about our diversity of gas supply. And so for all those reasons, as well as, with the shale for places like Ohio that we already have the Eagle Ford and the Marcellus and a lot of great basins that look like they have a long runway. And it looks like if gas prices go up, there's a whole lot of more production that can come on. So for that, we're somewhat optimistic that there will be a kind of a lid on gas prices. Of course, you can't predict them month to month. Certainly this winter, we had a gas price spike given the heavy usage. But, I think for all those things, we feel pretty good about adding some more gas generation, but we don't want to get too... we want to stay flexible so that if there is, it looks like there's a sustainable, higher-priced gas environment that we can, adjust to that. On storage, I think you were referring to electricity storage. We have in Michigan one of the largest in the world pumped hydro facilities, which we're currently upgrading and adding to. I think it's in the neighborhood of 1,500 megawatts up in Ludington, right on the other side of Lake Michigan here from Chicago. Well, not directly across from Chicago, but up north a little bit further on the other side of the lake. And basically, you know, we view that as a very good a daily storage opportunity and been using it since the 70s for that. And again, it's being refurbished and upsized today. We think that serves Michigan very well. And in terms of other storage projects like battery storage, we're very eager to see how that might develop. We're interested in a lot of the research that's being done there, and I think we would love to see some cost-effective, smaller electricity storage projects available.
Last question.
Yeah, hi, John. Nice job. My name's Rich Lopieri, and I'm from PSEG, New Jersey. My question has to do with the possible conflicts between nuclear and wind, where rising wind generation impacts low load periods of nuclear during off-peak periods like your summer, and negatively affects the nuclear balance sheet, if you will, margins and whatnot, by subsidized wind, where nuclear plants have to pay to stay online during the off hours. Do you anticipate any problems, business problems relative to your nuclear plants based on your increased wind?
We do not in Michigan, although I understand, you know, Illinois is one of the primary places where that impact takes effect. You know, we have 4 nuclear units and 3 of them are regulated, so they're not subject to the market pricing and the fact that they might have to pay somebody to take their electricity at night when the wind's blowing, which happens to Illinois nuclear plants somewhat. We do have one unregulated nuclear station which is still contracted for several years at least, and you know, we might face those kinds of challenges somewhere down the road. I think it would probably be 2021 would be the year where we'd have to think about that. But short answer, we understand it's a problem in some states, but not in Michigan.
Thank you, John. Okay, appreciate it. You bet. Join me in